Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're in class with us today. We broadcast 2 hours, Monday through Friday, from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains on Genesis Communications Network. John is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. And I am delighted to be broadcasting with my dear friend Dane Wigington of geoengineeringwatch.org, senior USA Prepares instructor. Brace yourself. What you're about to hear will be unpleasant, often frightening, but absolutely true. It's the alarm. You need to take action. Prepare yourself for what is about to happen. We're talking about the climate. We're talking about geoengineering. We're talking about what is unfolding right in front of our eyes. Welcome, Dane Wigington.
Hello, Vincent. Thank you for your willingness to update on this incredibly dire issue that people, if they understood the gravity of, would certainly make a priority issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dane, we met on the phone years ago. And correct me if I don't state this correctly, but you have an off-grid system. You generate your own electricity via the sun, and you noticed that your power generation was decreasing in lockstep with what was happening above. And you tied them together, and you realized that the spraying of the skies was reducing the solar radiation that was generating electric power on your, we'll call it reserve in California. Is that right?
You're correct. We have the largest website in the world on the subject of geoengineering. It's called geoengineeringwatch.org. We are non-political. We don't advertise on our website. Our purpose is to make people aware of the fact that governments around the globe, most specifically our own, being that our military is bigger than the next 10 militaries combined, is the single largest participant in climate engineering, but governments around the globe, including governments that we perceive to be opposing governments, U.S., Russia, China, are all colluding and cooperating on climate engineering programs. And for people who think this is just some other issue, I would caution them to consider this. We're talking about a complete interference in Earth's life support systems, programs that destroy the ozone layer, completely disrupt the hydrological cycle, are most singularly responsible for the epic forest burn downs that are happening all over the world, that are triggering feedback loops, that are further fueling climate collapse, programs that are saturating our atmosphere with extremely toxic heavy metals and chemicals, metals like aluminum and barium, primarily raining down through the air column so much metal, it is actually changing the pH value in forest floors and the soils. So how much of that are we all breathing with every breath? And we have lab tests from around the globe to prove this. So of all the challenges we face, of all the issues people are focused on, if we can't inhale without sucking in lungfuls of toxic heavy metal, and we see every human disease associated with these metals going off the scale, if we have programs that are, again, destroying, literally unraveling Earth's life support systems, how much longer will we be here? And Vincent, we've already seen, for example, the bees have collapsed, right? The colony collapse disorder, correct?
Absolutely. We've been reporting that for years. We're farmers here, and we see it. We absolutely see the bee collapse. No question about it.
Let's use the bees, in fact, the insects as a whole, as a harbinger. But we have tried to sound the alarm for farmers and beekeepers, and for nearly a decade that there was a bigger issue with the bees than farm chemicals or radio frequency transmissions, and that issue was the toxic heavy metals I just mentioned. We now have peer-reviewed study to prove the bees are dying of symptoms of massive aluminum exposure, and they're exhibiting symptoms that resemble Alzheimer's or dementia in a human being. The toxic heavy metals are killing the bees. Why don't we hear more about this in media? Because they don't want to touch this issue. If the bees can't survive, how long will we survive? And in fact, we now know, and we've stated this for almost a decade at geoengineeringwatch.org, the insects as a whole are collapsing, 80 to 90%, as we've measured in Northern California with former Forest Service scientists that we work with. We now have peer-reviewed study to prove that. Insect Armageddon, 80% collapse in insect populations. How long can we survive if the insects can't survive? Our situation is so far beyond grave, people need to wake up to the fact that we're fighting for our lives at this point. It's not just climate engineering. We've been horrible stewards of the planet. There's no getting around that. But climate engineering being the single greatest assault ever launched by the human race against the web of life.
You know, Dane, I'm broadcasting from my studio at the farmhouse in Missouri. And I've been talking about the weather. I've been talking about it's dry, it's dry, it's dry. We've had to sell, we raise black Angus cows, as many of our class know. Well, we've had to sell a third of our herd because we can't feed them, because we haven't had rain. We're going to have to sell another third in about a week. That's going to leave us with a third. This is what we do. This is how we survive economically. We raise cows. There's not a lot of money in raising cows, but that's what we do. And we don't have, it's so simple, Dane. You know, we were having a discussion around the table, the kitchen table, and our son, who is a degreed farmer, said, it's simple. We can't feed our cows. And if we can't feed them, they'll starve. If we keep them all, they'll all starve. If we sell most of them, the ones that we have, we may be able to live, comfortable lives. But we cannot farm the way we've been farming for the last 13 years because we don't have the rain. But we do have intense solar radiation, intense here at the farm. And I can measure it, Dane. Our solar system is generating more electricity than we've ever generated before. And we don't have the spraying of the skies that we used to have. It's still kind of a sheen. It's still kind of a hazy, but we don't see the crisscrossing of the chemical aerial sprays. So what I'm saying is I can measure for sure that the sun is stronger here. The garden is wilting. We have to water it multiple times a day. The grass is not growing. The cows are suffering. The ponds have either dried up or are almost dried up. The algae bloom is horrific. It's like the ponds have half of the surface area covered with a thick rug of disgusting, gooey, black or green algae. Is that what you're seeing out toward California?
It's happening all over the globe. In regard to any lack of the visible spraying you're seeing over your particular area, I want to make clear to your listeners that because the U.S. has, again, a military that's bigger than the next 10 militaries combined, it has focused on pacifying its potentially counterbalancing population, a population that could alter this equation if they woke up. The eastern half of the lower 48 has been focused on again and again and again as an engineered cool-down zone. How do we know this? Because we can look at the GISS global departure from normal temperature maps, and the only blue below normal temperature zone you see, and again, a lot of that is even statistical manipulation, but it's the eastern half of the lower 48 for the last several years. The most populated portion of the U.S. is the eastern half. So the visible spraying is at times because of the jet stream loop that's put in the eastern half, and they tend to spray in front of that wind pattern instead of in the middle of it. You guys may see less visible spraying in your particular area, but at the geoengineeringwatch.org Facebook photo gallery page, you can see photos from all over the world of absolutely shocking, in-your-face grid patterns in the sky every single day. And off the coast, and this is key, for example, off the North American continent, off the west coast, we see absolutely, again, shocking grid pattern spraying every single day over the entire eastern Pacific. It is completely blocking the hydrological cycle. It is completely blocking any inflow of moist air, precipitation. They are shutting off the rain to the entire North American West Coast. We can speculate on the agendas behind that. We understand some of those agendas. The West Coast is a climate sacrifice zone, if you will, but it appears also a target now. So what do we have burning? Not only is California completely ablaze, we have Oregon, Washington, and we have, as of last night, Vincent, 476 fires blazing in British Columbia. The planet's in total meltdown, and they are shutting off the hydrological cycle to the entire North American West Coast. This is all-out weather warfare at this point. And as far as the waterways, the drying up, the dying off, the massive algae blooms, happening all over the globe. Again, climate engineering destroying the ozone layer. It's not the sun that's hotter, it's the atmosphere that's decimated. That's the problem. We know climate engineering destroys the ozone layer. We know that. We've worked with a former NASA contract tech in the past. We supplied very expensive metering equipment. We know we're getting UVC on the surface, not just UVA and UVB, but UVC. That's the last band of UV radiation before X-ray. It's on the surface now, and we are not being told. Everything we are being told, from the actual temperatures that are occurring, which are being radically underreported, to the incredibly lethal UVC spectrum of radiation on the surface, including about a 700-800% increase in UVB. None of this we are being told. We are very far into the curve. We are very close to hitting the wall at full velocity. Aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems, crops collapsing around the globe, fisheries collapsing around the globe. Our reality will not be the same much longer.
Dan, you talked about the chemical spraying in the sky, the crisscrossing. It's visible. Well, I've noticed that if you look at videos that are on, let's say, Netflix, movies, you'll see that the camera doesn't tilt up very much anymore. They've tried to avoid showing the sky as much as possible, in my opinion. And every once in a while, the camera will make a mistake. The editor won't catch it. And you will see the chemical sprays across the sky. But I believe even Hollywood is trying to keep this information from us. Do you agree with that, or am I? I am. Okay. Dane Wigington's with us. We'll be right back after these few short commercial announcements. Class, you can tell the tone of my voice a little different from normal, right? I'm very concerned. I am not kidding. I'm seeing it, and farmers are going to be losing their farms. And you're going to have a tough time eating. Geoengineeringwatch.org. Class, Dane Wigington is with us. Geoengineeringwatch.org. Geoengineeringwatch.org. And he's listed on the instructors tab at usaprepares.com. Dane has made it available, or made his schedule available, so that he will be joining us on Fridays for about a half an hour, most Fridays. And he's going to be providing updates. So if you're concerned about what you're hearing, as I am, as the Finelli family is, you may want to tune in, especially for those broadcasts. Dane, you mentioned we are horrible stewards of the planet. Now, this is the only planet we have. We can't jump off and say, you know what, let's go to a better place. This is it. Now, why would the world government corporations let this geoengineering spraying happen? So if you look at the plastic islands that are in the oceans, like an island the size of Mexico of plastic trash, how did that happen? Well, the government corporations are the ones who are doing it. So if you say, you know, why would they let this happen? This can't be true. It can't be true. We are creating islands of plastic in the oceans the size of the country of Mexico. So yes, they are doing it. So Dane, can we point and say, okay, here are the culprits? Do we know exactly where to point our finger?
I certainly don't deny the psychotic behavior of those at the top of the power chain. But I have to state this, that they could not do what they do without legions of order followers that are complying. People, in preservation of their own paychecks or pensions, are all going along with this. We have militaries doing the same, including our own military. And I know we have honorable men and women in the military, Vincent, but at this point they must wake up. having the correct motive is not enough. It's not enough. They are participating in what amounts to their own demise, the own demise of their family as well. So we would have to remember the saying, we have seen the enemy, and he is us. And I'm not absolving those in power at all. Certainly they deserve to be put on trial and incarcerated forever or whatever the public determines. But they could not do what they do without public compliance. And I'm not just talking about our military. I'm talking about agencies, federal agencies, National Weather Service and NOAA, who are getting all their so-called weather reports from private defense contractor Raytheon. None of them speaking out. And I do want to state to your listeners, we haven't, I think we may have covered this in the past, but it's imperative to consider there is an illegal federal gag order on all National Weather Service and all NOAA employees. A gag order on the weathermen. We have people in agencies that report public contamination, like the EPA, air quality agencies. None of them are telling the truth about what's coming down in the air column. These agencies, Vincent, are not there to warn the public about the threat. They are there to hide it. And back to, people always ask this, Vincent, why would they, quote, those in power, do this to themselves, climate engineering? The equation is not that simple. Industrialized, militarized society has decimated the planet, and climate engineering is their method of, one, not only using weather as a weapon of war, which they are doing and have done to every single Middle Eastern country that Wesley Clark named 1 week after 9/11 as targets, which is what 9/11 was all about, a new Pearl Harbor to galvanize the American public to support this insanity. But every one of those countries underwent a once-in-1,000-year drought to destabilize them. That's a direct result of geoengineering, climate engineering. That's weather warfare. But they're also trying, and this is important, I mentioned the eastern half of the U.S. being kept cooled down by constant engineered operations, including chemical ice nucleation for weather modification. Vincent, you've seen the radical weather whiplash swings, right? Record warmth to massive hail
Absolutely.
in a day and cool downs. That's a chemical ice nucleation process that it cools down the moisture and cools down the area. So back to giving a primary reason for climate engineering, it's to mask the severity of damage done to the climate system, to mask the immediacy of the threat we face from an imploding climate system, and this is abrupt climate collapse, until the last possible moment, to pacify the population until the last possible moment, confusing them and dividing them as to the true state of damage to the climate and the true threat we face.
You talked about these violent swings in Colorado just days ago. We had hail the size of softballs.
Correct.
Class, I got to tell you, we had hail the size of marbles when I was in Virginia, and all I wanted to do was go 100 feet from one building on our farm to another. That's all I wanted to do. I had to put on a motorcycle helmet to get from one building to the other because it was just marble-size hail. Imagine softball-size hail in Colorado a couple days ago. We'll be right back. Dane Wigington's with us, and David in Illinois will be with you in just a couple seconds. Dane, if a person tries to jump the White House fence in Washington, D.C., he would probably be attacked, shot, arrested, or killed. If a drone flying over the White House, if a drone were flying over the White House, it would be shot down. An airplane flying an unidentified airplane flying in the United States over restricted airspace would be shot down. None of the climate-spraying aircraft that I know of has ever been shot down over the United States. That tells me that it is with the approval of the United States government. Is that a far leap, or do you think that's true?
Well, anybody that would think otherwise is simply not living in reality. These kind of operations absolutely could not go on, not only without the approval of the U.S. Department of Defense, but with the active involvement and coordination. And let's consider, Vincent, that the top U.S. military has stated on the record, I encourage your listeners to investigate everything I state, by the way. I don't want them to believe anything I say. I want them to investigate. Top U.S. military has, for many years, stated on the record, especially of late, that the climate collapse is the greatest national security threat of all. Why do we think they would ask our permission before intervening in Earth's climate system to try to mask the severity of what's unfolding, not to make it better, but to mask the severity of what's unfolding? We have stayed at geoengineeringwatch.org for 10 years, and I want to stress to your listeners, this is not about Al Gore. Al Gore is a part of the power structure, a hypocrite owning stocks in the very companies he claims to be fighting. It's not about Al Gore. It's about reality. It's about what we've done to the planet and the consequences from doing so, with climate engineering at the top of the list, but not the only issue. But in the last week alone, we stated at geoengineeringwatch.org, it's not as bad as Al Gore has told us. It's exponentially worse. It is what we have always stated because that's what the frontline data dictated. In the last week, what headlines do we have from major sources? Here's one: hothouse future for humanity. Scientists behind terrifying climate analysis hope they are wrong. From ABC News, Europe battles wildfires amid massive heat waves. We've probably heard that. UK Independent, the apocalyptic tone of heat wave reporting doesn't go far enough, not when the issue is human extinction. I could go on and on and on. Here's the mathematical fact of the matter. On the current course, if we remain in this course, nobody's here in the geologic blink of an eye. And I'm not talking about millennia or centuries. Mathematically speaking, on the current trajectory, no one's here in 10 years. No one. That's how bad it is. We're on track for Venus syndrome. That's barring nuclear cataclysm. If we remain in this course, if we continue to completely derail Earth's life support systems from all forms of human activity that are damaging the energy balance of the planet, but with climate engineering at the top of the list, if we continue in this course, we are done. We've already lost 80 to 90% of Earth's insects. We're losing species at 200 to 300 a day to extinction, plant, animal, and insect. That's 15,000 times the background rate, 1.5% of normal. Mathematically speaking, on the current trajectory, in a decade or less, we're gone. And that doesn't mean that things stay normal till then. I will be personally extremely surprised if we reach the end of this year, if not sooner, without major links in our chain of reality imploding. Store shelves starting to empty out. It's already happening in other countries. We've triggered about 50 feedback loops on the planet. That makes this equation exponential. And these changes are occurring. Anybody who can't see it at this point is got their eyes wide shut.
Dane Wigington, I confirmed what you said. I've noticed store shelves are emptying, and they're being, food is being replaced with trinkets, Chinese trinkets. And I went to Aldi, A-L-D-I, a food store that I patronize in Missouri, and I like them. Well, I confirmed with one of their employees, yes, they are stocking fewer items. The inventory is down. And I'm sure she wasn't supposed to tell me that. I've seen it at Walmart. We've reported. You are absolutely 100% correct. Quick question before Dave joins us in Illinois. Dane, you worked for a very large corporation, Fortune 100 corporation, I believe, and you've retired. Is this, and I'm sure you did very important work there, is this the most important work of your life? I'm talking about geoengineeringwatch.org.
Without question. I only work for Bechtel Power. It's the world's largest engineering firm. I only worked for them for a short time in my youth because I did not want to remain in that environment, which I felt was criminally corrupt. It's like Halliburton. So I left at an early age because I did not want to be in that environment. And I've never sacrificed my ability to speak out, as many have done in the military and other places. I've never agreed to that. And as far as what we're doing right now, sounding the alarm on the single greatest threat we collectively face, sort of nuclear cataclysm, yes, this is absolutely the most important endeavor in my life. I've spent the last 15 years of my life doing this, something I did not want to do. I'm not politically oriented, not an activist, but bottom line is, how do I face my children, Vincent, and not do what I'm doing? They have no future on this course, none.
Dane, I find so many parallels. The more we talk with each other on air, off air, I find that there's so many parallels in your life, your families, and my families that, you're not being paid to do this, I'm not being paid to do this, but we both feel that sounding the alarm is really, really important.
On that note,
David and Dylan,
before we get done, if we could, and you can state when, I just want to make sure we allow this window. Your listeners need to understand they are not helpful or helpless, in this equation. They are not helpless. None of us are helpless. And that there are specific ways to effectively and efficiently sound the alarm. I just want to make sure we go over that before we close so that people understand they can help us to change this equation, to change the flavor of it. We're going to hit the wall no matter what, but we can change the flavor of how things unfold. If we do this properly, we are not helpless. We can cover that whenever you want.
Okay, and right after David in Illinois, he's been patiently waiting. David?
Got it.
Yes, I was listening to one of my science shows last week, And they had a article where a bunch of researchers released a new information that was going to add to the global warming problem. But that's to believe it was them that it's actually there. They said there's microbes in the dirt, the soil, and they sit there for thousands of years. And when it gets super hot out, like it's getting now, they release themselves into the atmosphere. And thus, when they do that, then they release more carbon in the air. And now they say that's going to make even addition to the global warming. But here's my thing. How do we know it was there and it's not the government spraying that and then laying in the soil and then releasing itself when these drastic heat waves come?
Well, the question is valid, certainly much of what we were told. I'm sorry, Vincent?
Yeah, Dane's going to answer that question. David, thank you very much. We've got to be concise today. Great question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Certainly, governmental agencies often lay blame in places where it doesn't fully belong. For example, we have official agencies like USDA, Forest Service, BLM, blaming the massive tree die-off all over the country, indeed all over the world, on beetles. Beetles are a symptom. They're not the core causal factor. Back to the soils. The bioavailable metals that we know are coming down to precipitation from climate engineering are poisoning root systems, thus killing the trees from the bottom up, the destroyed ozone layer killing the trees from the top down, the disrupted hydrological cycle weakening the trees, the rain cycles being disrupted, rain being cut off. So the beetles are blamed. Same with certain aspects of soil microbes. However, we do know that in the case of methane, for example, the thawing and releasing of methane, there's too much data to back that up. It's certainly happening, and that's, if your listeners is familiar with the Bermuda Triangle scenario, the ship sinking, for how many decades have we known that was occurring? That's methane fields, methane deposits on the seabed that are thawing because the oceans are warming and releasing, migrates through the water column to the surface, then through the air column to the atmosphere. It's covering the planet right now like a layer of glass. Methane is 100 to 120 times more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas over a 10-year horizon. In fact, there's enough methane on the planet to turn our planet into Venus many times over. And we believe a large portion of that, and it's not a large portion of the whole. Only 0.5% of the methane thought to be in regions of the Arctic like the Laptev Sea being released. Only 0.5%, 1/200th of the methane that's believed to be there is a 400% increase on the total greenhouse gas forcing effect we already have. So bottom line is, again, there's enough methane to turn our planet into Venus, and we are on track for Venus syndrome right now. In the current trajectory, our planet, short of factors that are unforeseen, if we stay on this trajectory, our planet will resemble Venus in the geologic blink of an eye. And people need to understand this. They need to put their iPhones down. They need to quit squabbling over the political everything and understand that the entire political theater, I don't care what side of the fence they're on, I don't care. It's all theater, all of it, designed to distract them from what's really happening around them. We need to let go and disconnect from that political idiocy on every mainstream channel, everyone, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, doesn't matter. We need to disconnect from that, face the horizon, understand the ship is going down by the day. If we don't deal with it, starting with stopping climate engineering, we're done. That's very simple. We're done in the extremely near-term horizon, planetary omnicide, nothing left.
Dane, I did the arithmetic, and I'm sure many in the class have done the same as you said it. You said no one's here in 10 years. I believe those were the words you used. That's 2028. Is that the right number? Is that what you're saying?
Not far sooner. Now, again, I know that for many people, they will roll their eyes and walk away. I assure you, in the coming weeks and months, they will rethink their unwillingness to examine the severity of what's unfolding. The equation could not be more exponential. People have been trained to think that such geologic changes take millennia. That is not true. We are in uncharted territory, absolutely uncharted territory. The changes occurring right now, at minimum, conservatively, statistically, scientifically, are happening 170 times faster than at any previous point in Earth's distant past, based on paleo data. Any previous extinction, 170 times faster. We are in the sixth great mass extinction right now, not just beginning it, but well into it. And again, what we have stated at geoengineeringwatch.org for nearly a decade now, finally, even in the last weeks, is being admitted to from mainstream sources. Why? Not because they want to tell the truth, but because they can't hide it any longer. That's all.
Dane, when we come back, will you tell us, please, what can we do? We've delineated some of the problems, just the tip of the iceberg. What can we do? How do we do it? And how many of us do we need to get involved to get it done? We'll be right back. Dane Wigington, geoengineeringwatch.org. Dane Wigington's with us, geoengineeringwatch.org. Dane, very quickly, we're in our last segment. I understand that 3/4 of California is now covered in smoke. California is the third largest state in the United States, following Alaska and Texas, and that the heat of these fires is unlike fires experienced before. I was a volunteer fireman. I've been exposed to fires. I've seen fires. These fires are hotter, and I understand trees are exploding. Is what I said true?
It's completely true. In the case of the forest fires, which are radically fueling the planetary meltdown, we can most directly attribute that not to climate change, not that climate change isn't happening from many sources, many causes, but we can most directly attribute this to climate engineering. Why? Because of everything we discussed earlier in this broadcast is cutting off the hydrological cycle. Again, they are cutting off the precipitation to the entire West Coast right now, and they have been for many, many years. They've been reducing that precipitation, and the rains that we get are not the beneficial rains of the past. You get deluges in certain areas that doesn't saturate the soil, and the atmosphere dries out extremely rapidly afterward. Why? Because these are desiccant particles they're spraying, desiccants. They absorb and accrete all available moisture, so the dry out happens much faster. So climate engineering, cutting off the rain cycle, toxifying the soils with the toxic heavy metals we mentioned earlier, destroying the ozone layer, and these metals are an incendiary, Vincent. It's an incendiary dust. So all the trees, in addition to dying, the foliage is coated with an incendiary dust, which further fuels the volatility of the fires. Bottom line is, we need everyone involved in this effort to wake the masses, to force media, the power structure-controlled propaganda sources is what they are, to mask the threats that the public is facing. We need everyone to help us force this issue to the light of day. That involves sharing credible data from a credible source, not some source that posts any sensationalized anything that comes along so they can get YouTube views or views on their site. Credible data. If your listeners go to the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org, they can find our informational tools, and you can share the links for these tools, like our 20-page fact and photo summary booklet, which I think I just sent you some of, and they can share that link from their own home computer for free, the full PDF, the most condensed, hard-hitting summary of this issue of all. They can use those links to print their own materials where they live if they choose, or we make them available on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for our approximate cost of producing and shipping. The goal, to get these materials into circulation as quickly as possible, passing on credible printed material with shocking photographs, NASA satellite images, copies of documents, federal documents, Senate documents, gag orders. That is exponentially more effective than pointing at the sky and ranting. But we must get this issue to light and to halt, and bring climate engineering to a halt as fast as we possibly can. Time is absolutely not on our side. All of us are needed to bring this issue to the light of day if we can do that. If we can wake our military brothers and sisters up, others in agencies to the fact that, and wake their families up to the fact that they are participating in our own certain near-term suicide. That's what it amounts to. We have a chance of stopping these programs from the inside out, Vincent.
So we know that the elite are going underground. We know that. They're exploring other countries. They're literally going underground into bunkers because they think that it'll buy some time. Is it really going to help them all that much?
Not very long. Again, we are on track for Venus syndrome. Venus is not 900 degrees on the surface of the planet because it's so close to the sun. All things being equal, Venus would be 20 degrees warmer than Earth's baseline temperature, which we are already about 6 to 7 degrees Fahrenheit across that divide. Venus is the temperature it is because it underwent a runaway greenhouse effect, exactly what we are undergoing right now. Abrupt climate collapse, runaway greenhouse effect. The oceans end up in the atmosphere. Atmosphere is 100 times more thick than Earth's. Heat gets in, it can't get out. And that's exactly what's happening on our planet right now. On the current course, no one survives. we must address this issue, Vincent. We must prioritize, and this is the greatest, most immediate threat we face short of nuclear cataclysm.
Last I mentioned that this would be disturbing, and I hope that you take heed. And I request that you share this message, this broadcast, with friends and family. Sit down and discuss it, and then have a plan of action as to how you're going to ring the alarm to get more and more of us involved. Dane Wigington's been doing it for years and years and years. This is his mission in life as he sees it right now. Dane, I understand that you're going to be back with us with updates on Fridays. Thank you so much.
I'm going to do my very best. You know, the unraveling is happening so quickly right now.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of a USA Prepares. Stephen Heuer's with us. Synergistic Nutrition. SGN80.com. SGN80.com. Telephone number 888-988-3325. 888-988-3325. Welcome, Stephen.
Good morning, Vincent. Thanks for having me on.
Glad to do it, Stephen. Stephen, topic today, autoimmunity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very exciting subject. As I mentioned before, you know, I acquired this hyperthyroid situation in 2016, and after now almost 3 years of, 2 rounds of stem cells, visiting an expensive doctor on the West Coast, working with the doctor locally, no one knows what to do to fix it. And recently I delved into the subject of autoimmunity more in depth and basically discovered that at the foundation of it's theorized that at the foundation of any chronic disease is autoimmunity, where the tissues of the body are being attacked by your own immune system. And so it's become a very exciting subject because now I know, I have a pathway back. And I believe that based on what I've learned, that it can take as little as 6 months to fully heal what I'm dealing with, or, any number of chronic diseases that people deal with on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what is, starting from the top, what is autoimmunity?
So it's a situation where your body, your immune system that's supposed to be able to recognize foreign substances and basically dispose of them, whether they're toxins, whether they're pollens, whether they're proteins, viruses, microorganisms, recognizing them as not self, putting forth a defense mechanism that basically mobilizes those irritant substances and excretes them from the body. And autoimmunity is a situation where the tissues have now become, they now look like foreign material to the immune system, so your immune system goes after that. And it's typically the weakest link. So genetically, whatever your particular weaknesses are, that's the tissue that usually is where it starts to look foreign and the immune system starts to attack it. So it could be your heart, and you could have, the 20 years of your immune cells attacking your heart tissue, but not have any symptoms until, enough damage is done. And so that's what autoimmunity is.
Okay, so the body's making a mistake by attacking itself. Is that correct?
It's actually not making a mistake. So what's going on is that either a toxin has become deposited in that weak link tissue, and now that toxin deposited in that tissue looks like a new substance. It's called an epitope. And so the toxin and the tissue combination look foreign, so the immune system attacks it. Or if you've got autoimmunity, a foundation of autoimmunity is you have to have a leaky gut. So instead of your intestinal tract filtering and absorbing only fully broken down food particles, so that you have amino acids being absorbed instead of proteins, and fatty acids being absorbed instead of whole fats, and or monosaccharides, individual sugars being absorbed instead of starches. When you have a leaky gut, you're absorbing undigested food particles, and that basically paves the way for this all to happen. So these one of the other ways that the autoimmunity happens is the food particle gets into the bloodstream and attaches to the tissue, and in the same instance as the toxin does, it now looks foreign to the body, so the immune system, the B or T cells, start attacking that tissue. Another reason is that the protein that you've absorbed whole and undigested, like, say, gluten, it has a certain amino acid sequence that makes up that protein, and somewhere else in your body, that same amino acid sequence exists, So now the immune system, when it attacks that foreign protein from your food you've absorbed, it'll start attacking the tissue with the same amino acid sequence. And then another reason for the immune system attacking itself is chronic inflammation. So, in the case of children with vaccines and stuff, and the aluminum in vaccines, it's a toxin. It goes right into the system and gets stuck in the tissues or in the nervous system, and the body starts attacking that and creates chronic inflammation. Or you've taken non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, which are known to damage the gut, create leaky gut, and also white sugar and certain offending foods. The main two offending foods is gluten and gliadin that's in not only wheat but rye and barley, and also gliadins in like oats and stuff. So they create this. They can create leaky gut because it's already been studied and shown that no human can digest gluten down into its individual amino acids. It can only break it down into chunks of amino acids. So that creates chronic inflammation in the gut, creates leaky gut, just gluten in and of itself. And, for several hours after eating gluten-containing food, you've got inflammation in the gut and temporarily a leaky gut. And this chronic inflammation is another reason, and there's various reasons: white sugar, dairy, alcohol, drugs, different things, junk food. These are all things that create chronic inflammation in the body. That's another reason why the immune system will attack its own tissues is chronic inflammation. The tissues don't look normal in that inflamed state. So it's really not making a mistake in attacking your own tissues. It's really doing what it's supposed to do. And, you got to figure out, you got to know what to do to reverse all that.
And that's why Dr. Norman Shealy, I believe, is saying no wheat, no wheat, no wheat, and the same thing with Dr. Joel Wallach. We're talking about autoimmune diseases, so we're talking about inflammatory bowel disease, Graves' disease, psoriasis, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, right? Isn't that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
For starters?
About those. Those are like very common ones, but there's, there's like an autoimmunity association that's got 159 on their list thus far. So it's like virtually every, chronic condition appears to have our body's own immune system attacking certain tissues as a component.
Okay, so when you talk about rheumatoid arthritis, that's fairly common. So what do we do about that?
So you have to heal the leaky gut. So you have to definitely remove the gluten and gliadin-containing grains from the diet, and you have to remove casein from the diet. So that's the protein found in milk, and it's also the protein found in goat's milk, cow's milk, doesn't matter. That is a difficult protein to digest. So anytime you have a difficult protein to digest, like gluten or casein, then you're going to have particles of the protein go into the bloodstream whole, intact, undigested, continuing to exacerbate the inflammation in the gut, the holes in the gut, and then the proteins absorbing into the bloodstream, creating this autoimmune situation. So you have to eliminate the two most common allergens, wheat and dairy, and or any gluten-containing, gliadin-containing grain. And you also would be wise to get a specific test. You have to go to a holistic physician and have that holistic physician authorize that you get this 90 food panel test offered by Cyrex Labs, C-Y-R-E-X. So Cyrex Labs offers these two very important tests that helps a person basically identify all the foods to which your body's developed antibodies to. So during this time of the inflammation in the gut and the holes in the gut and absorbing different food substances, your immune system has developed antibodies to a lot of different foods. And so by doing this 90-panel food test, you can identify what other foods besides wheat and dairy that you have antibodies to that you have to eliminate temporarily so that you stop getting the immune system all riled up and attacking tissues. And so that's a very important test. It's like $339. And then there's one called the 24 tissue antibody test. So that's a test where you're looking for what tissues your immune system's already attacking. 24 different tissues is what the test is looking at. And then so that can identify in advance of actual symptoms. A famous author on the subject, Dr. Tom O'Brien, he wrote the book called The Autoimmune Fix. And he's also got really good educational YouTube series, a docuseries on the subject on YouTube for free. And, he himself looked into this. He was a major athlete, and he basically looked into this before he had actual disease, and he found out that he had 4 tissue antibodies to his brain. So he was a candidate for, MS or some kind of neurological deterioration disease if he didn't catch that and identify the foods that he needed to eliminate from his diet. One of his clients that he worked with had MS, and she had 9 lesions in her brain. She was in a wheelchair. She basically followed this whole protocol where you eliminate the offending foods, you eliminate the gluten and the dairy, and in 6 months she was symptom-free, out of the wheelchair, only had 1 lesion left in her brain. There was one other client that he worked with where the gentleman had his father die of heart attack at 44 years of age. His 2 brothers died of heart attacks in their young years, and so he was like next in line, expected to die of the same thing. So he saw this Dr. Tom O'Brien. Dr. O'Brien basically did these tests and identified that he had 4 tissue antibodies to his heart. And by eliminating the dairy and the gluten and a stricter diet, in 6 months, all of those antibodies to the heart tissues were gone. So therefore, his immune system was no longer attacking his heart. He was no longer a candidate for a heart attack like his brothers and father had experienced. So that's a very important test, 2 important tests to do, and of course you have to get them through a physician, a licensed physician, and that would be one way to give yourself a heads up to avoid the disease. But if you already have some sort of chronic disease, you would have to do this to identify what other foods you need to eliminate, and results are really positive. I mean, like people have vast improvements in only 30 days. And then within 6 months, it's common that the condition is rectified, is totally resolved, MS included,
So, Stephen, you said wheat and dairy. Now, if you take wheat and dairy out of the average American's diet, there's hardly anything left. I mean,
I know.
Really? Really?
Yeah. Yeah. They're the 2 most common foods in the American diet, and I think it's one of the big reasons why Americans have so much disease. I mean, there's multiple reasons, but those are 2 major ones. And, because the gluten molecule, once it's partially broken down in the bloodstream, it can combine with another molecule and become a morphine-like molecule. So it's called glutamorphine. So it has you could say, neurological addictive effect to, calm you down. So you could say wheat is very addictive, not to mention how much it puts on body fat more readily. There's a good book out there called The Wheat Belly, and you can lose unwanted body fat off your belly just by eliminating wheat.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Stephen Hewer's with us, SGN80.com, Synergistic Nutrition. Stephen, white sugar contributes to inflammation? Yeah, big time. So white sugar has been studied to basically show that once you consume it, it triggers an inflammatory cascade of a bunch of inflammatory chemicals, one of them being cytokines, which are known to be inflammatory chemicals. And so it's, you're really setting yourself up when you consume white sugar products just to basically guarantee you're going to have autoimmunity, which, is currently labeled as some specific disease, whether it's diabetes or cancer or cardiovascular disease. These are all going to be under the umbrella of autoimmunity. And sugar is just gasoline to the fire for disease, And everybody's got a sweet tooth, or a lot of people have a sweet tooth, and, I don't think people should deny that, but I think they should reach for a delicious ripe mango or some dates or a banana or peaches or whatever that particular fruit that's in season, and use unheated honey as one way to get some of the sweetness, real intense sweetness, and then you're okay, Yeah, and I was doing some research about honey, and honey's been ameliorated with all kinds of other products. So even the big companies, by the time you get the packaged honey from a large corporation, it has been ameliorated down, so it's really not 100% honey anymore in many, many cases. So, Stephen, so white sugar contributes to the inflammation, and there are boxes of food-like products that say now with real sugar. So I guess they've removed the high fructose corn syrup, and they've used real sugar. Is high fructose corn syrup as dangerous to us as white sugar? It's more so. So
fructose, high fructose corn syrup doesn't get metabolized in the same way because it's fructose, so it doesn't initially stimulate the high insulin production needed to create it. It has to be converted into glucose to be used, and so it's a delayed utilization, so it's like a delayed higher blood sugar level and a delayed insulin, a higher insulin, so it's more contributory towards triglyceride formation and cardiovascular plaque and body fat accumulation than just taking sucrose, which is a combination of both glucose and fructose together as a disaccharide compared to fructose, which is a single sugar or a monosaccharide. That definitely not good stuff. And the other thing is that a lot of times people think, in our culture, they've jumped on the bandwagon of using artificial sweeteners. So there's saccharin and there's sucralose and, NutraSweet. And it's been studied and proven that these feed the growth of the pathogenic organisms within the digestive tract that cause you to put on extra body fat. It's like a guarantee because it's now kind of pretty much proven that the microbiome of your digestive tract determines how thin or how overweight you are. And it's been proven that people that are overweight have a smaller spectrum of probiotics in their digestive tract. And they've been able to take the probiotics of an obese person's bacteria in their feces and give it to a normal weight, thin rat, and it puts on more body fat even though it's continuing to eat the same diet. Or, vice versa. You could take the probiotics from a thin rat and put it into an obese rat, and the obese rat becomes thin. So the way you want to look at your probiotics is that you need to feed them on a daily basis healthy fiber from fruits and vegetables. And the result of, eating a spectrum of fruits and vegetables with fiber in them is that you get a variety of different bacteria growing to feed on these indigestible fibers. And the result of these bacteria feeding on the indigestible fibers is that they produce butyrate. And butyrate is the number one fuel for the intestinal lining. And if you have enough butyrate, then if you have holes in your intestines, you can heal up that leaky gut from the fuel being fed to the intestinal lining from the metabolism of these microbes, basically feeding on indigestible fiber. And, a lot of times people, because they have a limited spectrum of probiotics, so they're more prone to obesity, I recommend that they also, clean out their intestines, take, 3 days of oxy powder, and then after 3 days of oxy powder, you want to take this full spectrum probiotic that's human strength. Because a lot of people don't realize that sauerkraut and kimchi and miso and whatever, these natural fermented foods don't contain human organisms. They contain plant organisms, so they don't live in your gut. They're transitory. They pass through. And I'll share more on the other side of the break.
Hold that thought. Be right back. So, Stephen, you're talking about fermented vegetables such as kimchi and sauerkraut being transitory in the gut. Please continue.
Yeah, so when people are basically trying to heal the gut and they've, you could say, destroyed their microbiome in the past from, antibiotics and drugs and nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs and bad diet, then they've lost a lot of different species that not necessarily are going to ever come back. And so if you just consume fermented fruits and vegetables, or I should say fermented vegetables typically, the sauerkraut, the kimchi, the miso, these are going to provide you with only the strains that are basically growing to decompose that vegetable or that miso. And so while they help create a beneficial environment for your own indigenous bacteria to grow back in your digestive tract, they do not inherently become a part of your own microbiome. They're transitory, just like you said. And so it's important for people to reestablish the human strains in the gut. And so I tell people, clean the slate with oxy powder, which is a product that's ozonated magnesium. So when you take 6 to 8 capsules on an empty stomach, it releases oxygen into the intestines, which basically liquefies the fecal contents, and so everything comes out loose. It's not diarrhea. You're not losing electrolytes. It's all safe and fine. Do that for 3 days and minimum, and preferably 10 days, and you've cleaned the slate of the intestines. And now you can take this product we have called Microbiome Replenish, which has 18 human indigenous strains in the formula, and you need to take 1 sachet every day on an empty stomach with water, and for 15 days. Once you've done it for 15 days, you're good. You don't need to keep taking. A lot of times people keep taking probiotics all the time, And they don't need to do that if they've got the full spectrum. They just need to feed the growth, because once you've got the indigenous ones, they'll not only grow and proliferate on these fibers and prebiotics supplements, but they'll also differentiate and start to become different strains so that they can handle the metabolism of the fiber from, carob or chocolate or jicama versus the fiber from, an apple or whatever. And in fact, apples, now that I mention that, they've did studies where just eating an apple, a cooked apple, twice a day, that the cooking releases the pectin, and that pectin actually becomes the same healthy mucus material of the intestines, and it really helps heal the digestive tract to, eat a couple of apples a day, and cooked is even better because of the pectin being released. Basically, and then there's a really good prebiotic supplement that I recommend because it's called Gut Balance. So basically, you take the full spectrum or broad spectrum 18 strain of human indigenous bacteria from microbiome replenished for 15 days, and at the same time, you can be taking a product called Gut Balance that has hyperimmune egg powder as well as arabinogalactin. And hyperimmune egg is got this immunoglobulin called IYG that gives you passive immunity, kills off organisms to keep you free of infections, but it also lowers the zonulin levels. So there's this chemical that the intestines produce when they're in an inflammatory state, and they're opening up the tight junctions and basically creating holes in the gut. Gliadin is notorious for stimulating zonulin production, which is inflamed intestines with pores happening. And so you want to lower zonulin so you can restore the tight junctions and basically heal up the holes in the gut. And the hyperimmune egg does that. It's been proven to lower zonulin levels, so it helps to contribute to the healing of the tight junctions. And then the arabinogalactin is from the larch tree. Larch tree is from the USA, special proprietary process where they are able to extract the fiber. And this particular fiber, arabinogalactin, is just wonderful for feeding the growth of your bacteria so they can produce that butyrate chemical that feeds the lining of the intestines that then ends up basically strengthening the mucosa and helping to heal the intestines. So those two products are super important, I recommend, for people that are trying to overcome any chronic disease and, of course, heal the gut and the microbiome.
Yes, Stephen, there's an article in the Washington Post, and it says, in the body of the article, it says, those keeping tabs on President Trump's diet know that Wendy's and McDonald's are staples, while campaigning, Trump inhaled fillets of fish and Big Macs and snacked on Oreos, and then he'd wash it all down with Diet Coke. But the headline of the article says, Trump, I think they have a typographical, they really mean President Trump. President Trump reportedly drinks 12 cans of Diet Coke each day. Is that healthy? So we get back to the question of the, I can't imagine, but that's what this article says. And so we get back to the question of the synthetic, the manufactured sweeteners. How dangerous are they? Just one more time so that our class can hear it again.
Well, they're very dangerous because they've actually been studied and found that they feed the growth of the bacteria that would cause a person to accumulate body fat. And they don't know the exact mechanism. Like one of them is that you're basically feeding the growth of bacteria that are more efficient at using calories. That's one theory. Another is that it's due to you not having a normal dietary cessation of satisfaction, satiety. Your sugar fix isn't really addressed because you've not really given yourself sugar, so you end up having more carbohydrates instead. And that's one other reason. But basically, it's very unhealthy. And I didn't know that President Trump consumed such a unhealthy diet. That's amazing.
Yes.
I mean, for him, obviously, his genetics are off the charts strong. That's why, if I look back at my father's genetics and how he smoked 2 to 3 packs of Winston's a day and drank to drunkenness every single night of his life from 20 to 50, and still kept on getting up every day and doing the same thing, 8 hours of work every day, that's a testament to what happens when you have a strong foundation, when your mother and father were eating really good foods, full of their minerals and full of their phytochemicals and nutrients, so that when they conceived you, and gestated you had a tank body. And then after 1955, chemical agriculture came in, and you had the diminished mineral sugars in your fruits and vegetables, so that you were no longer getting the key activators of your liver's ability to produce albumin protein, your 64 codons of your DNA that are not being activated completely, so you can't create protein synthesis in every cell correctly. And so you start ending up having, the weaker generation born from after 1955 forward. It took about 10 years of chemical agriculture. So from about 1960, 65 forward, you started to have a higher incidence of people born with narrow jawbones, shorter stature, skinnier build, narrower nostrils, because of wide jawbone and wide nostrils and, a strong skeleton. That's a sign of somebody that had proper nutrition prior to conception and during gestation. So I'm just amazed and appalled that the president is that ignorant that he would, consume these kinds of non-food, junk food items on a regular basis and not care about his own health and his own longevity. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Well, he likes to play golf, and I've not seen a golf course yet that doesn't use chemical sprays on the lawns, okay? Nobody wants to walk on a lawn chasing a little tiny ball with a big stick and get fleas and ticks on them. So golf courses are sprayed. He spends time on the golf courses and spends a lot of time in the big cities, including New York City, where hardly any food of any kind is grown. So he has, been surrounded by that environment. I'm not saying it's right. You said that he is ignorant of the facts. I think that is actually correct. I think that's correct. And he needs to be made aware of that. So, I'm looking at a picture of him on an airplane, and he's got looks like a McDonald's French fry container, and he's having French fries. Right next to that looks like a Big Mac, and right next to that, it looks like a Diet Coke. Well, it is a Diet Coke. There's no question about it. But I've read many sources that he drinks Diet Coke beyond excess. So that's why I asked that question. So, class, just because someone else does it doesn't mean it's right, okay? Just because, and I'm not saying I'm against President Trump, because I'm not. But I am having a tough time, Stephen Heuer, with what do we eat? I mean, seriously, if you take wheat and dairy out of the equation, I'm guessing
here's what I recommend.
95% of what's in the food stores right now that is packaged, not in the produce section, but 95% of the food packages would be eliminated from the supermarkets if we took wheat and dairy out. Yeah,
probably so. But, it just takes a little bit of investigation to find that you have all kinds of solutions. And, if you obtain you get grass-fed animal products, so grass-fed beef, lamb, buffalo, pork, and then the fat and the proteins are the most satiating food components, much more so than sugar. So, 1 or 2 pieces of fruit a day and some vegetables, whatever, that's great. But if you try and satiate yourself on sugar, you're not going to be satiated because your blood sugar is going to rise and fall. You're going to have low blood sugar cycles, so that you're going to crave more sugar. So proteins and fats are the most satiating of foods. And you've got, they're totally permitted on this diet because, these are going to be foods that will promote your healing. So you take whatever foods works for you. And, of course, if you do this test that I talked about, the 90 food panel test, you might find that certain meats your body doesn't do well with. You already have an antibody response to some animal proteins, and so you have to choose the other animal proteins. But I have found this wonderful solution. So basically, one thing I learned recently, Vincent, was that in the old days, soil was full of not only humic but fulvic acid. And this fulvic acid became a part of the metabolism of the plant, enabled the plant to absorb nutrients and have actually an electrical charge in the cell, the actual energy of the cell. And in the old days, we consumed these foods high in the fulvic acid, and we got that beneficial chemical, which then in turn would open up our pores and enable us to absorb nutrients, but also become a part of the cell and enable the cell to have an electrical charge or optimal electrical charge, as well as acting as an antioxidant. And so taking this folic acid supplement will charge up the cells, detoxify the body, neutralize inflammation, and basically give you that chi or mana in your diet that you're not getting from a lot of your foods. That then enables you to eat some cooked food proteins. And I like to cook them, stew them, or steam them. And I can share more on the other side.
Yeah, we'll be right back. Stephen Heuer, SGN80.com. So, Stephen, I have these spiral-bound notebooks, and I buy them at the Chinese factory outlet, Walmart, during the back-to-school days. And I have I've got bankers boxes full of them, and I'm holding the one that I'm using today. And I wrote on the current page, WWSD. WWSD. What would Stephen do? And what I mean by that is breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And how do we get off cheese? Okay, so we turn away from sugar and, the artificial sweeteners. What do we eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and how do we get off cheese?
So I think that the diet should consist of these animal proteins. The best way to cook them for your health is not on the barbecue. It's not baking it at 350 to 450 degrees in the oven. It's not dry heat cooking. If you want to avoid all the carcinogens and the advanced glycation end products that come from dry heat cooking meats, you want to cook it with water. So a crock pot, stewing, and steaming of meats is the healthiest way to cook them. That's only 212 degrees in temperature, which water boils or steams. And, of course, you'd add your onions and your cabbage and whatever. And I believe that just making a great goulash on a regular basis of whatever meat you like. Last night I did liver and hamburger with cabbage and onions and garlic and some ghee. And that's the thing that's really satisfying is you add ghee to your diet because there is, milk proteins casing in butter. And you can actually buy butter and from an Amish source, and you could just, heat it up in a pot, and then all those casein proteins come to the top, and you skim them off, and you've got this pure ghee that you could leave on the counter at room temperature, and it'll stay fresh for forever. So that's the favorite fat to cause satiation. So meats with ghee, definitely a part of the diet. Vegetables cooked with your meats, and then fruits to the degree that your body needs them and likes them. And as far as, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that's kind of dependent upon your schedule. Some people eat their breakfast is eating like a king and, lunch is like a medium-sized meal and dinner is the smallest meal. Other people, it's switched. They have the smallest amount in the morning or only fruit or nothing, and then their bigger meal is, noon or 1 o'clock and then again at 7 or 8 o'clock. So it just depends on your schedule and what you're going to put in there. But, fruits, vegetables, and then the meats and the good fats, flax oil should be in the diet as well. And then as far as overcoming the, craving for cheese, that's a craving for either the fat in the cheese or the calcium in the cheese. So because our produce and our foods are low in calcium, I recommend people supplement with Intracal and K2+. So Intracal is calcium magnesium orotate, so you're going to basically support the cellular need for cell division, energy production, plus bone remineralization. And then you need the K2+ for the vitamin A, D, and K2. And all three of those fat-soluble vitamins are involved in calcium metabolism and the removal of calcium that's built up in the soft tissues, arteries, or joints. And so those two things together ensure that you get the calcium utilization you need at the cellular level so you're not craving the calcium from cheese or from dairy. And then if you're craving dairy for the fat purposes, if you do the ghee in your diet along with, appropriate amounts of avocado and flax oil and coconut fat, you'll get your fat needs met and not crave cheese for the fat purposes.
Stephen, I'd like to take a quick detour. So you provide consultations. Can you tell us what one of those telephone calls would be like in a capsule form? So someone calls you, they arrange for a consultation. How does it go? What's a typical call? What do they say? What do you say?
So I basically go through their health evaluation form that they filled out in advance, and I basically just scan through it and talk to them about all these different things that I'm seeing on the health evaluation form. And at the end of reviewing that information, which probably takes 45 minutes to an hour, I do this test. I want them to send me a teaspoon of their hair. I take and I put it on my very sophisticated device that tests people in person or remotely, and I get more information from that. That takes another 30, 45 minutes to do that. And then I spend another 45 minutes creating a supplement schedule for them. I send that to them by email. I call them back up. Part of the consultation, I'm not on the phone with them. I do the supplement schedule, and then I call them back up. They have that in their inbox, and we look through the supplement schedule together, and I talk to them about the diet and the supplements that they need to adhere to heal their body. It takes about 3 hours.
Yeah. Okay, and if you want to call Synergistic Nutrition, 888-988-3325, 888-988-3325. Stephen Heuer, thank you so much for being with us. I really appreciate your advice, counsel, and concern. That's Stephen Heuer.
Thank you, Vincent.
You're very welcome, Stephen.